Welcome to Paid for Your Presence, powered by Soulful AI. I'm Erica Duran, business mentor, brand strategist, and creator of the Paid for Your Presence method. This isn't another Grow Your Following show. Each week, you'll get unfiltered strategy, grounded frameworks, and the kind of truth-telling most marketing podcasts avoid, so you can grow your brand without diluting your voice or burning out. Here we focus on elevating your expertise, refining your message, and designing a way of working that actually fits you, so business feels aligned again. Because you don't need a bigger stage, you need a stronger presence. Forget the rules, take a breath, tune in, and step into your authority. Never settle. This is where performance ends and presence begins. Welcome to the Paid for Your Presence podcast powered by Soulful AI. I'm your host, Erica Duran, and today we're diving into one of the hardest lessons I had to learn about freedom in business. This episode is called Presence Over Performance, the Real Freedom Shift, because if you've ever built something that looked beautiful from the outside, but quietly drained you on the inside, you'll see yourself in this one. For years, I thought freedom meant flexibility. No schedule, no office, work from anywhere. But what I built looked more like a performance of freedom. Constantly producing, constantly proving. At some point, it stopped feeling like the life I left corporate to create. So today, I'm taking you behind the scenes of that shift through a series of defining moments that forced me to rebuild the way I work and the way I lead. A luxury cruise that taught me how appearance can trap you. A day at Epcot that reminded me what presence really feels like. A year at the Margaritaville Resort that revealed how easily, quote, freedom can turn into a performance. Each one carries a lesson about building your business from the inside out, with clarity, sustainability, and real freedom. The kind that doesn't crumble when you stop performing. So wherever you're listening from, walking, driving, or winding down for the night, take a breath. This is where the performance ends and presence begins. The luxury cruise, when freedom looks right but feels wrong. The ship had that steady hum you can feel more than hear, almost like a heartbeat. And honestly, that's kind of what I needed at that point. Something steady, something that felt like movement, even if I wasn't totally sure where I was headed. I was on what's called a FAM trip, short for familiarization. It's what travel agents do to experience a resort or cruise firsthand so they can sell it better later. I'd been running my own agency for a while by then, but this is my first official FAM trip under my own agency, not somebody else's. When I was a kid, my mom used to take me on her trips all the time. She'd have her clipboard and brochures, and I'd tag along pretending I was her assistant. So when I stepped into that ship all those years later, it felt like a full circle moment, like, okay, this is the grown-up version of what little me used to dream about. The cabin itself was gorgeous. Minimalist, clean lines, a few pieces of modern art. And the balcony, the main attraction. They called it an infinite veranda. Basically, instead of stepping out into a balcony, the whole wall just rolls down, so your room becomes part of the ocean view. On paper, it's brilliant. In the brochure, stunning. In real life, kind of weird. You think that would feel like total freedom, glass wide open, ocean right there. But the air got heavy and humid. The breeze didn't really come in. It was like you could see freedom, but you couldn't quite feel it. I remember standing there thinking, this is exactly how my coaching business feels right now. Beautiful, luxurious, everything looks right, but somehow I'm stuck inside. Because I wasn't really on vacation. I was filming clips, writing captions, editing between deck tours. Everyone else on that ship was out there actually living, drinks in hand, hair blowing in the wind, not documenting it for anyone. and I was rushing past them to go back to my room and post something before the Wi Fi got spotty. I told myself it was fine, that it was work and I'd rest later, but deep down I knew I was still performing. Even out at sea, surrounded by this dream life I'd built, I was still chasing the illusion of it. I traded one kind of rat race for another, only now it had better views. That night, I sat in that perfect polished little cabin, watching the lights of the port shimmer on the water through that glass balcony wall, and it hit me. This whole thing looks like freedom, but doesn't feel like freedom. And that was the moment I realized something had to change. That trip stayed with me not because of the cruise line or the destinations, but because of what it showed me about how I was working. It made me realize I had built this business that looked completely free on the outside, but behind the scenes was right back into that performance loop. Different outfit, same trap. And here's what I learned from that. Freedom isn't just about where you can work from or how much money you make, it's about how you feel when you're doing it. If you can't breathe inside your own success, if you're constantly producing, posting, improving, you're actually not free. You're just working from prettier places. I see it all the time with my clients too. They leave their 9 to 5 jobs chasing the dream of flexibility, and 6 months later, they're busier than ever, working from their couch instead of a cubicle, but still rushing, still performing, and still waiting for the day they'll finally arrive. Presence over performance means you stop living for the highlight reel. You start living inside the moment you've already created. It's not just about dropping everything and moving to an island. Trust me, I've done that too. It's about asking right here, right now, does my business feel like mine? Or does it just look good from the outside? And if the answer is no, it doesn't feel like mine, that's not failure, that's feedback. That's your business asking to evolve with you. When I came home from that trip, I started to rebuild everything. How I planned my content, how I served clients, how I let technology and AI support me without running me. That's where the paid for your presence method really started to take shape. Not from more hustle, but from actually creating space for the work to breathe. Because freedom isn't just about escape, it's about expansion. And presence is what makes expansion sustainable. The moment I couldn't unsee it. A few months after that cruise, I had another moment like that. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just quietly disruptive. It happened at Epcot. I wasn't there for inspiration or content or even nostalgia. I was there because it was familiar. And familiarity has a way of revealing patterns you've been too close to notice. It was the final day of the Flower and Garden Festival, late spring, Florida heat fully committed to its job. The park was busy in that particular way that feels both celebratory and frantic. Everyone trying to squeeze meaning out of a moment before it disappears. And as I moved through the park, something clicked. I wasn't overwhelmed, I wasn't stressed, I wasn't even tired. I was aware. I noticed how easily movement masquerades as momentum, how activity creates the illusion of progress, how quickly presence disappears when everything is optimized for speed. Epcot is designed to move you from pavilion to pavilion, from experience to experience, from highlight to highlight. And suddenly I could see it, not just there, but everywhere, in business, in content, in the way we're taught to build. We move because movement feels productive. We post because posting feels like participation. We optimize because optimization looks like intelligence. But none of that guarantees alignment. I caught myself reaching for my phone out of habit, not because there was something meaningful to capture, but because that's what visibility trained reflexes do. And I stopped. Not in a performative way, not as a declaration, just stopped. And in that pause, something became obvious. I had been confusing being in motion with being present. They are not the same thing. Presence requires friction. It requires discernment. It requires choosing not to move when movement is the easier option. That realization followed me through the rest of the day. I noticed how often people were rushing through something they'd claimed to love, how frequently documentation replaced experience, how rarely anyone seemed fully inside what they were doing. And here's the part that mattered. I recognized myself in it, not as judgment, as clarity. Because once you see that pattern, you can't unsee it. You start noticing how often business models reward speed over depth, volume over intention, and performance over embodiment. And once that mismatch becomes visible, it shows up everywhere in offers that look aligned but feel hollow, in brands that are polished but disconnected, in lives that look free but feel tightly managed. That day didn't make me want to burn anything down. It made me understand something far more irreversible. I couldn't go back to building in a way that required me to outrun my own awareness. I couldn't pretend that constant output was the same thing as meaningful presence. I couldn't unknow the cost of staying in motion just to avoid stillness. That was the moment presence stopped being a concept for me and became an infrastructure. Not something you perform, not something you explain, something you built around. Because when presence is missing, no amount of activity can replace it. And when it's restored, everything else recalibrates. That's what that day gave me. Not a lesson, a line I couldn't cross back over. Margaritaville, the prettier cage. I still remember thinking I'd hit the ultimate jackpot in 2021. I had just negotiated a year-long stay in one of the pastel-colored cottages at the Margarita Resort in Orlando. It was part of a podcast partnership, my last big one, though I didn't know it at the time. That place was picture perfect. Palm trees, tropical colors, resort pools, and that whole freedom business backdrop. It felt like the next level of my brand, and honestly, it was on brand. I had just moved from Hawaii, so the island to mainland tropical vibe made perfect sense. The goal was simple: film a massive free course called Paid for Your Presence 1.5. And when I say massive, I mean full scale production. Camera setups outside in the Florida heat, hair and makeup I never wear in real life, wardrobe changes, perfect lighting. I wanted it to look like the dream, the kind of course that made people stop scrolling and think, wow, she's really living it. And it did look like that. The videos were gorgeous, the backdrop was stunning, everything about it looked effortless. But what you couldn't see was me, sweating through professional makeup in 98-degree humidity. What you couldn't see were my neighbors peeking out from their porches, probably wondering why I was filming the same scene 12 times. Or my family who'd come into town to go to Disney, texting me from the parks asking, "Are you done yet?" And the whole time I kept thinking, this is a free course. Why am I doing this to myself? The truth is, I knew better. I knew the return on energy didn't match the effort, not emotionally, not financially. Sure, it brought a few high ticket clients, 5 figures here and there, but it didn't make sense for the production, the expense, the opportunity cost of missing an entire year of my life to prove something I already knew, that I was good at what I do. And somewhere between endless editing and the Florida storms and uploading marathons, I started to see it clearly. I wasn't creating from freedom, I was performing freedom. I had built an entire visual brand around the appearance of ease, the perfect tan, the perfect script, the perfect shot. And underneath it all, I was exhausted. That year in Margaritaville was my last year in performance mode. It was the last time I believe I had to show freedom to prove it existed. And the irony, now, years later, with Soulful AI and the systems I teach inside Paid for Your Presence 2.0, I can create the same level of authority and production value in a fraction of the time. From my desk, in yoga pants, without a lighting setup, and without the humidity. AI doesn't replace my presence, it protects it, it amplifies it, it lets me create from truth instead of proving through effort. Those videos from Paid for Your Presence version 1.5 are still gold. They're inside my vault now, but I'll never forget the lesson behind them. Freedom that requires that much performance isn't freedom. It's just a prettier cage. That year at Margaritaville taught me something I wish I'd learned a decade earlier, that freedom marketed isn't freedom lived. And you can tell the difference. Real freedom feels quiet, spacious, grounded. Performative freedom feels like production, like proving. And the longer you keep up performance, the future you drift from what you actually built your business for. And the longer you keep up performance, the further you drift from what you actually built your business for. What looked like success on paper, the sponsorships, the brand deals, the perfect content calendar, was really just another version of the same cage. I thought I'd escaped when I'd left corporate. I had just decorated it with palm trees and pool floats. So if you're listening and you've ever found yourself exhausted from your own version of the Freedom Show, whether that's posting nonstop, over delivering, or constantly feeling like you have to look successful to be successful, I want you to hear this clearly. You don't have to perform freedom to deserve it. The work now, the real work, is learning to build systems that support the life you actually want, not the life you think you have to show people online. It's about shifting from aesthetics to embodiment. Because when you embody your freedom, you don't have to post it. People can feel it. It comes through in your voice, your boundaries, your energy, and your offers. And that's where tools like Soulful AI come in. Not to automate your presence out of existence, but to give you the margin to live the life you've been trying to prove you have. To capture your real authority in your real words, without needing the heat lamps and the highlight reels. So if you're feeling that tension between the business you've built and the life you actually want, this is your permission slip to slow down and rebuild it from presence. Because the truth is, you can't outproduce your way into peace. The only thing sustainable long term is your authenticity. And the only kind of freedom we're chasing is the kind you don't have to film to prove. Integration, what I couldn't unsee. When I look back at these moments now, the cruise, that day at Epcot, that year at Margaritaville, I don't see failure. I see refinement. Each one stripped away another layer of performance until there was nowhere left to hide from the truth. Not a dramatic truth, a quiet one. I wasn't confused about what I wanted. I was clear and pretending I wasn't. That's the part people don't talk about enough. Sometimes the hardest moments in business aren't when things fall apart. They're when things work, but at a cost you can no longer ignore. Because once you see the mismatch, you can't unsee it. You start noticing it everywhere. In the way business models reward speed over discernment, in how volume is praised more than depth, in how visibility gets confused with vitality. And once you recognize that pattern, continuing to participate in it feels dishonest, not just to your audience, but to yourself. That's where I was. I hadn't built something broken, I had built something impressive, but it required me to stay slightly disconnected from my own life in order to maintain it. And that's the line I couldn't cross back over. The cruise showed me how easily freedom can become a facade. Epcot showed me how reflective performance had become. Margaritaville showed me the full cost of packaging freedom instead of embodying it. Together, they made one thing unavoidable. I didn't need a new strategy, I needed a new standard. A standard where presence wasn't something I demonstrated, it was something I designed around. where my business didn't require me to be, quote, on all the time to be effective, where success didn't depend on how well I could maintain an image, where my work could breathe. That's when everything started to reorganize. Not overnight, not loudly, but permanently. Because when you stop building from performance, certain options disappear. You can't go back to chasing visibility just because it's familiar. You can't unknow what constant output has been costing you. You can't pretend that more activity will fill a misaligned structure. And that's not loss, that's clarity. This is the part of the journey people rarely prepare you for. The grief of realizing you can't return to old ways of working, even if they once brought you success. Because discernment changes the terrain. Once presence becomes non negotiable, your business has to meet you there. And if you've been listening and thinking, this sounds familiar, but I haven't been able to name it, that's not an accident. This episode isn't meant to teach you something new. It's meant to confirm what you already know and can't unknow anymore. And if that recognition feels unsettling, that's normal. It means you're standing at the same threshold I was. Not at the beginning of something loud, but at the beginning of something honest. And that's where real freedom actually starts. Freedom that requires that much performance isn't freedom. It's just a prettier cage. Once you can't unsee the mismatch, the only question left is what you're willing to stop tolerating. If this episode felt quieter than you expected, that was intentional. This season isn't about spectacle, it's about precision. It's for people who have already built something and can feel that it no longer fits the way it once did. If you're in that place where you can't unsee the mismatch anymore, you don't need more content. You need a different container. That's what I built inside my private community, Circle by Erica Duran. It's where these conversations continue with more depth, more discernment, and far less noise. You'll find the details in the show notes. Never settle. Thank you for tuning in to Paid for Your Presence, powered by Soulful AI. Join me inside Circle by Erica Duran, a private network where entrepreneurs connect for strategy, referrals, and collaboration, and where connection naturally turns into opportunity. Because presence isn't about being everywhere, it's about being unmistakable where it matters. Never settle.